want to talk to you. Today, I want to talk to you about visualization, mental imagery. And the reason for that is twofold. One is to give you a better feeling of what the field of performance psychology is. So we're really the science of action. And one of the ways that we really create that is helping the performer, helping individuals have the tools that they need to rely on, to fall back on when they're in those high pressure situations. So really focusing in on helping them define their intentions so that they can be clear and available when they're in the performance setting, so that they can act as they want to the best of their ability in that moment. Imagery is one of the interventions that we most commonly use. And it's, I think, one of the more underused and powerful tools that we as coaches can provide to our clients to help them grow even further. I started out working with athletes, and imagery was one of our fundamental skills. Athletes have very high pressure situations, limited opportunities to perform, and the outcome of those performance in the professional realm are very consequential. In the field of mixed martial arts, a loss is directly impactful to your paycheck. You only get half of your pay if you lose. Your prospects for future earnings decrease with each loss. And ultimately, your ability to stay within the career field is based upon your ability to win. That's pretty common for most professional sports. Those performance environments are a bit higher pressure than you would think for executives. But as I talk to entrepreneurs, I find for them, they put the same stakes on a lot of their performance moments that athletes do on their events as well. One of my advisors, Dr. Jeff Simons, he's written numerous chapters for various sports psychology textbooks. He wrote a chapter on mental imagery back in 2003. I was just back at Cal State East Bay, presenting to the graduate students there, and we got to spend a few hours catching up. He told me that he got asked to rewrite that 2003 chapter, but not to rewrite the chapter, but to add an addendum that would explain what has changed in the science since 2003 and what we now know as practitioners to do as best practices today. He found two things. First, he found that the level of research for mental imagery has really gotten deeply into the neuroscience field and into signaling field and mirror neurons. He also said that all of that advancement in ability and research has only confirmed what our beliefs were about how imagery works and about how imagery functions and benefits us. So there is nothing to update in how we've been doing mental imagery for the past 20 years. Instead, what we've found is that our thoughts have been confirmed by the science. And so I think that alone speaks to the quality of this as an intervention to use with our clients. With mental imagery, one of the things that it really does is it helps people, because they're creating a virtual immersive experience, they're able to practice the the cognitive styles that they want to be using during that performance to really understand for themselves what's optimal as well. Because it uses what are known as mirror neurons, which is a type of neuron that we're learning more and more about, that we found that that's where the functional equivalency comes from. So when we're neurologically, and I'm not a neurologist, I work in performance psychology, so I don't have the full biology behind it well mastered. But essentially, the mirror neurons will fire with the regular potential neurons when we're in action. So they kind of work together. When we're using mental imagery, we're just working on the mirror neuron level. As we talk about precognition and get into kind of the deeper science of the brain, that's where the growing theory is into why exactly does mental imagery have the benefits it does. The other thing that mental imagery is really great for is for skill development and just for practicing things. And it's pretty heavily used throughout the world for that, both in sport, military, as well as numerous trades. As a practitioner, when I bring mental imagery in, I'm really looking at three main areas where I'm trying to help people grow. One is skill improvement. And so we'll apply mental imagery into their practice techniques. That'll involve taking virtual reps as well as the actual physical reps. For motivation, the way that mental imagery benefits there is it actually lets people experience virtually the thrill of accomplishment. It helps them feel or imagine their ability to overcome the obstacles that may otherwise tell them to not take action. And in a lot of cases, we can use imagery to create a deeper sense of trust among our team, among the equipment that we're using, or about the consequences that we're going to face for success or failure, and create a more realistic view so that we have less anxiety and less obscurity that we're facing as we're moving ourselves forward in life. When I've used mental imagery, I've mainly, first and foremost, used it to help athletes and other performers clarify their intentions. Intentions, I follow this philosophy that trajectory is more important than position. And I interpret that to mean that our intentions are really the most critical aspect in life. And so if we're unclear or uncertain about our intentions, that's going to create a lot of opportunity for chaos to enter into whatever it is we're trying to do. When you're building a mental image of how you want a future event to occur, intention becomes forefront in the brain there, and it becomes part of the conversation. That alone makes, even if your clients don't actually go through and spend numerous hours practicing their visualization scripts throughout the year, just writing them and getting some clarity on what their intentions are, I found to be a huge benefit alone in and of itself. So really just that intro part of the intervention itself with your client will have huge benefits. A lot of winning in sport requires being the better and ultimately better in terms of more determined decision maker. And so one of the great aspects of mental imagery is you can rehearse the critical decisions that you may need to make throughout the day and start to learn better decision-making processes for yourself as a performer. And so it really creates some self-awareness in their decision-making process and helps them plan in a way that normally they would not. You can also help, as you've been teaching them various coping strategies, you can, through mental imagery, help them understand places and times to use those coping strategies. So they might have a difficult situation that they know that they are going to be in. As part of your imagery script, you can help them prepare to use a coping strategy that you know they've been successful with and is applicable to this situation. Imagery is also a great way to help practice recovering from finding yourself in a bad situation. With my MMA fighters, they all did not want to be flat on their backs on the bottom of the mat of the cage, up against the cage with their opponent on top. But they all needed to know how to get out of that situation. And so with imagery, we're able to set a start point without needing to define how we ended up in that position, and start to imagine how we would work out of that situation. I think in business, we can imagine a lot of situations where we find ourselves in a less than favorable situation. And instead of worrying about being there, being able to confidently find our way through will be just provides huge benefits, as opposed to ending up in a ruminative, self-destructive state in those moments. When I work with entrepreneurs, so lately I've been doing quite a few talks with various mastermind groups throughout the Valley, and I'll come in and teach mental imagery as my portion. Through a presentation on that. I've found that for most leaders, difficult conversations are the things that they want to avoid the most. Feedback is not very well given throughout corporate America and not readily given. Through mental imagery, you can help leaders start to practice. Remember how we talked about how earlier on, how athletes could use mental imagery to take a imagined physical repetition and then do the actual actually do the action themselves in order to increase their practice, to improve the quality of their practice, to improve the quality of the outcomes of their practice. For managers, you can have them role play with you having these difficult conversations, and you can bring mental imagery in to have them virtually go through it and learn how to train themselves to not go into the stressful thoughts and feelings, and instead maintain their focus on keeping a calm voice, a steady pace, delivering the feedback without criticizing the employee, and improve their group performance and their performance as a leader. I've helped a lot of people with various presentations. This is where you can reach out to sales teams and tell them, hey, I want to help you increase your sales by getting some virtual sales reps in, getting some virtual repetitions of sales calls, and finding creative ways to find areas in their day-to-day where practicing virtual practice would really help them. I've found that mental imagery is one way that we can also help increase diversity in the workforce. We can go through and have leaders imagine their biases coming up and actively countering them before they're in these interview situations. If diversity is a big goal of theirs, we can help them make the behavioral adjustments they need to increase diversity on their teams. And then obviously we can use imagery as a way to practice any type of skill once we develop a strong ability. So before I go into how, I just kind of want to give you a deeper story of how of ways that I've used it. When I started working with MMA fighters, one of the first things that became apparent to me is that, first off, practice is where they get injured. They rarely get injured in they get injured in competition, but most of them they don't get to compete because they get injured in practice. And that they need to take that high risk practice in order to advance their skills to a level to make them viable as a professional. So I would use mental imagery as a way, I would actually introduce mental imagery as a way to get virtual reps in before I'd start using mental imagery as a way to rehearse their competitions. And that would start with them working at the heavy bag. So those would be just a giant long bag suspended from the ceiling somehow. And I would have them just take a jab at the bag, really be focused on it, hearing the sounds, feeling the sensation, seeing the bag move, and then step back, close their eyes, recreate that feeling. Do another jab at the bag, go back, recreate it in their mind, and just start by spending 5 minutes 3 times a week with that kind of practice to get them able to start creating the details and building their imagery skill. Then we'd move from just a simple jab on the heavy bag into taking virtual reps as they're doing combo and mitt work with their coaches, moving then into doing virtual reps of their jujitsu and grappling training, then making it entire rounds, bringing it into their sparring, into their mock competitions, and then eventually building it into their full preparation for their competition, including the day of the competition, their warm up, their walkout, the fight itself, certain elements of the fight, as well as them having their hand raised at the end of the fight. What I found is that as I taught fighters to use imagery with their practice, it would take about 3 months of working with that to get them to start develop a habit of it. But most of them, 5, 6, 7 years later, still use it without any coaching direction to use the skill. They found it that powerful that they adopt the skill on their own. I think as far as intervention to use with clients, if it's something that you see past clients regularly using without your prodding, I think that speaks to it being a very good tool and one that is worth mastering. So when we create I've given you a couple white paper and a guidebook. So we're going to go through actually developing imagery scripts, and we're going to do that as in pairs. But there's a few things that are really important to make mental imagery work. And that's first is vividness. If we understand mental imagery to work on the mirror neuron level, then what's going to be important for that to be beneficial in a performance setting is that we're using all of the neurons that are going to be called upon when we're performing itself. So right now, if we're thinking about all the things we're taking in through this presentation, there's sight, there's sound. You probably notice aspects of your body in terms of where you're sitting, how you're feeling. There's the emotional load or emotional experience that you're having right now. There's also the self-talk, the voices that you have going on throughout your head. There are maybe additional sounds you're hearing outside. There's probably a sense of space that you have within your room. You're either in a large room or a small room that either makes you feel cozy or exposed. So there's all sorts of aspects that come in there that you'd observe when you're in the performance itself. And so vividness really refers to incorporate as many of the senses as you can with as much detail as possible. Control is the ability to practice the image that you want as opposed to letting your imagination run wild and start imagining catastrophe happening. So control is really the ability to have the image be the optimal or ideal way that you want things to transpire, as opposed to being in a place of worry where now your image is considering all the problems and going into problem areas. And then clarity is really understanding what are the intentions that you have here. With when an athlete comes to me and says, my intention's to win, that's great. Of course it is, but how? And because they need to create a mental movie of that competition, that how has to actually become detailed. So the start of the bout, are you coming to the center, or are you allowing your opponent to come to you? Where are you? How are you going to move your opponent from being on his feet to on the ground? How are you going to advance your position there? What is the position that you're looking to move to? That's what I mean by clarity, is really getting them to see less obscurity and fog in how they want their performance to be, and actually taking the steps to put definition on it. For performers, this can be a little bit anxiety inducing. So it's important to understand that you need to assist them in developing that clarity. And some of that assist will be helping them shut down some of the worries, some of the what ifs that they might be coming in with. Usually when you're writing an imagery script, the advantage with going about this conversation with an imagery script is that when they start talking about bad things that could happen, you can just go back to, but what we're trying to define right now is the ideal. How many people have had clients say, I feel rudderless sometimes, or I feel like I can't find my center? They're lacking clarity. That's one of the places where they lack, that's one of the signs that they're lacking clarity. And so writing an imagery script with them can actually help with that. So I'm going to switch my screen share.
And I want to make sure everyone's got the handouts.
And so this is the white paper, and I want to bring up this diagram. So I'm going to actually scroll down here first. So, because I think it's probably more, it's a little bit clearer filled out than it is up there as a diagram, as a flow chart. When I use imagery, the way I was taught to use imagery is to first and foremost understand who is your performer, what is significant or important about that, who they are in the performance context, and what is the outcome that they're hoping to achieve. And so start there as the first place to consider, because it might be that, yeah, maybe mental imagery isn't the ideal intervention to use, but it also helps you start from it helps you start on it starts with boundaries as opposed to starting from a place where you're just pure free form. And so some of the some of the aspects of who that matters, the age of your manager, the age of the leader that you're working with will probably matter. If it's somebody who's a brand new leader, who's relatively young, political capital is different for them than, say, a 10-year well-seasoned leader who's approaching the top and has a lot of political capital behind them can do things a different way. So it's important to understand the context of who they are in that performance environment. The outcome, it's really, some of the times I find that getting them to define their outcome, that's really just a magical moment in itself. How do you want to fight this fight? I want to win it. Okay. That tells me nothing about, do you want to use your striking? Do you want to use your grappling? Why do you not want to use your grappling? That type of question. So if you're a manager, I want to have I want this relationship with my employee improved. Well, that's pretty vague still. So going through writing an imagery script gives you another avenue to have that conversation, to create that clarity within their mind. And so I think I just want to emphasize, building out this part is a huge chunk of what makes mental imagery such a great tool to use. It really provides great session conversational content that is meaningful and then can be applied to an exercise for them to do out of session. So it feels to them like they actually, that time was very valuable to them. It increases the feelings of value that they feel they put into that time. So once you understand who they are and what their expectations are, then it's getting into the next layer of effectively teaching mental imagery, which is establishing a practice schedule. And that's the when and where. When and where are you going to actually practice this? If I, as your coach, don't go through that step, the amount of adherence or compliance that I'm going to get to this intervention is going to be very low. So that kind of becomes step 2. So we're going to be breaking into dyads down here in a few. And so I want to explain these to you this way so that you in your dyads are able to go through and have a practice experience of laying the groundwork for an imagery script. So the first thing I want to know is really understand them and their perspective of who they are and why that matters to this performance setting. And then what is it that they hope to achieve, and really get that into detail. So when I talk to an entrepreneur who's hoping to grow his business, then I'm trying to get to the expected outcome to be, is that right now is what we're working on with this script, is you communicating to them in a way that increases the number of outbound sales calls that happen that day. Something tangible, measurable, something that you could put into a goal setting intervention. The why is that's into you as the coach now to understand, given who they are and what this expected outcome is, what is it I'm hoping that this intervention will achieve for them. And this is where it becomes important to understand. If they want to improve their skills, you probably don't need to have them imagine getting a promotion. What instead you want them to imagine is their competency improving. So it could be that their speed increases, or some aspect that you've determined as competency with them improves. If it's hey, I'm really struggling to sound calm and clear when I'm giving pitches to potential investors, then you really want to work on that motivation side and really have them imagining getting those yeses from the investors so that they can create that vicarious experience that Bandura would tell us is important for our self-efficacy, so that they feel more capable of achieving because they're able to imagine themselves actually having a successful accomplishment. Having that image of them being successful is a huge motivator if that doesn't already exist for them. And then the what really becomes that's our storyline. And then the how is really the script. I'd like to pause for questions if there's any questions. Keep going.
I'll ask a question. What's the difference between how is a storyline, or what is a storyline, and how is a script? So that sounds like the same thing to me. Can you elaborate?
Yeah. So what is more the think of it as, are we writing a comedy? Are we writing a drama? Are we writing a that type of thing? So the what is a competition, a practice, the type of performance, the specific performance or situation it is, and then the how. That's actually then the words that we're going to put into it. So we're kind of just really drilling into each of these questions is helping us as coaches to drill deeper into what are the actual, if I'm going to have them imagine themselves successfully telling one of their direct reports that direct report is engaged in a behavior that needs to change. So that's kind of the what, and then the how now becomes, okay, so are we going to picture this from first person, from you seeing that employee? Are we going to picture it from a third camera angle? Does it work better for you to imagine yourself seeing this like it's on a TV? What are if I'm writing out everything you see when you're sitting at your desk, what is that? Is it bright? Is it dark? Is it, am I seeing pictures on the wall? Right. So what we're doing here with the how is we're really creating all of those, how that event is actually going to feel. That's probably a better way to say the how. The how is the actual experience. How is that going to feel? How is that going to look? How is that going to sound? How are you going to emotionally feel? How are you going to be thinking? How are those physical sensations going to be in your body? How is your tone going to be? How is your pace?
So Toby, can I ask about I haven't looked at the script worksheet, but I'm so curious and so excited to get to that point. Would you do a new worksheet for each effort? I know you said it's really not the big picture. It's more the components of it that we're scripting, so to speak. We're imagining. So do you do a new worksheet each time, or is the worksheet like the blueprint?
Yeah. So what I do, so here I pulled up the worksheet. So each time that I'm creating, here we are. Each time we're going, so with athletes, it's a new imagery script every time they have a new competition. Two reasons for that. One is each competition is slightly different. So it's valuable to plan them out as individual competitions. So I think for an entrepreneur or for a manager, each interaction, each significant interaction is a different performance for them. So it would be worth a different script.
Okay.
In addition, as they're progressing, as you're working with them over time, that their abilities are going to increase and their concepts are going to change. And so you need to update to take in account for that as well. I think another way to think about it is if we do one visualization script once for one event, then we're kind of saying that that's how we're going to do that always forever. I think there's very little opportunity for that in real life to have that much for that consistency to even make sense. So here's what I am hoping for you. And I know this is, I'm not giving you a huge structured thing to work with. This is how I was taught imagery. And so as all coaches tend to do, we do default to how it happened for us with some advancement to that process that we lived through. But really what I would like you to do is on this creating the imagery script, I would like you, so use this, have this as your reference when you're working together in pairs. What I want you to do is to give yourself a few seconds at first to come up with a scenario of a client that you have. So whoever, one person's going to be the coach, the other person's going to be the client. Whoever is being the client, try to think of one of your clients or one of your experiences and have that in mind for the coach then to say, and we're gonna kind of fast forward the relationship a bit here a little bit as well. I want you to assume that you've already been established to the point where there is a performance event. So it could be a sales call, could be a presentation, could be a difficult conversation, whatever it is. That's going to be the reason that they want to do imagery. And I just want you to go through trying to understand for them what, sorry, I'm on, that's, go back to my other. What do they expect as the outcome? What is important about them? Then establish how can we, what would be their practice schedule? I want you to determine.
Toby, are you sharing something? Because I just still see the imagery script.
Oh shoot, they do you guys see this? Am I on can you guys see that table again?
No.
Oh, how do I change that? Let me do it this way. Soft share, back to share. All right, there we go. So I want you to come up with, I want you to be able to fill out who they are. So what is important in this performance situation? What's significant about them in this performance situation? I would say brand new sales rep probably has different needs than I've been in tech sales for 25 years. But the what, I want you to really come up with that together. And then the how, I just want you to come up with what are the details that are going to be important. And I want you to do this. I'd like to, I think 10 minutes total, 5 minutes, and then switch from coach to coachee. And then we'll regather and we'll talk about the details that you found out, and then how to start writing that into an actual visualization script for them. Are there questions before we break out?
So we have one question in the chat.
Oh, let me
I
pull it
want
up.
to know if you want to save it until after. It doesn't apply to this specific exercise, but it is what we really want to hear from you on. And
Oh,
so,
difference
maybe,
between performance and mastery.
yeah.
Performance is where we're taking action. That's where we're actually in the, so performance is when we're is when we're actively engaged in action that has a direct effect on some sort of result that we're trying to create. Mastery is the way we're able to perform. So mastery is our ability to perform, but the performance is in itself the actual event. That's how I would define it. That's how I'd say the difference. Does that answer?
Mm.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions procedurally? Are we pretty clear?
I have a question. Are you expecting us to have some sort of a handout or something? I heard a voice come on saying we're to have a handout.
Yeah, they were put in the chat. Do you need me to send them to you directly, Tom?
I'm afraid that, well, perhaps, I'm afraid of whoever is going to be my partner is going to be severely let down because I really don't know what we're doing yet.
Okay, so Tom, here's what I want you to do. Excellent, thank you. I was hoping to get a question like that. So what I want you to do in your pairs, I want you to be the coach and say, and to come out there with the idea that we're going to use mental imagery as our intervention. And what I want you to get from the coachee is for this performance event that your coachee is imagining. And so imagine back to yourself or one of your past clients that had a performance event, a presentation, a sales call, a difficult conversation, or something else that you can think of. It could be a race that they participated in, whatever it is. Your coachee comes up with that, and then you as a coach are trying to understand, okay, what is it that you expect to have as your outcome for this event? And I want you to try to get some clarity around that from them. Then I want you to get from them, I want you as a coach to skillfully try to understand what is it about you that is significant to achieving this expected outcome. And that could be something that's significant for a group of yous, but specific to whoever they're to who they're imagining being. And then what is it specifically that they would want to imagine? So is it having the difficult conversation? Is it or is it actually putting together the documentation before the difficult conversation? Or is it actually talking to their manager about the difficult conversation that they need to have with one of their directs? Whatever it is, that what. And then the how, all I want you to come up with in the how is, what are all the details that you, the coach, and the coachee think would be significant details for that moment? What are all the details? What are all the possible visual, auditory, all the sensory details that apply in that situation? And so just kind of getting the building blocks, and then we'll come back together and talk about how to convert that into a script. Is that clear?
Are we ready to go to the rooms? Yes? Okay, I'm going to go ahead.
Welcome back. So I actually jumped in with Anne and worked with her. And I just wanted to describe that real quick and then give some openness. I know we're running out of time, or maybe I got 3 minutes, so I should go through that. So with Anne, what she had talked about is she's working with caregivers for hospice and other type of caregiving. And so for them, it's really helping them imagine points where they're not able to be engaged the way they want, where they're triggered or upset or whatever negative feeling that they currently don't like the way they're doing it. And so I came up with one potential example after talking with her, where it could be a 30-year-old man who's caregiving for his mother, and his mother has an accident in bed that now he has to take care of. And the content of that image, so the desired outcome would be to be kind to my mom as opposed to acting in anger. And we got the what, which is the 30-year-old man. So we know that there's certain, maybe there's certain things that we can pull on with him within his perspective of who he is to help create a transition there from anger into compassion. And so for us, the what was dealing with an accident. And then the how, the details are the pungent smells, that initial, the sight of the soiled bed, the initial anger that person feels, but then maybe putting their hand over their heart, taking a deep breath, picturing themselves relaxing and feeling compassion. And so they practice being triggered and transitioning into compassion so that their desired outcome, which is to treat with more kindness, can be achieved by them practicing this visualization script and practicing themselves becoming angry and then choosing a different way to respond, choosing to release that anger and to respond in a way that's more ideal for them. There are other questions I can take with our short time left. And I forgot, are we till 1 or to 1:15?
Some people are limited by their lunch hour, so they may drop out, but if whoever can stay on for Q&A, please do.
Yeah, I'm open to stay on for another 10, 15 minutes.
Perfect. Does anyone have an experience that they've were able to do this with a client before? Have you ever practiced some imagery or something similar to this? I've never seen it in a script format, so that's new to me. I enjoy that. But can anyone think of an experience they'd like to share where they've utilized something like this?
I'd like to share. So, hi everyone, my name's Emily. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm located in Utah. I hired a creativity coach from South Africa that I was working with around a lot of it was like unblocking what I felt like was kind of my creative drive, which is something that is really, I feel, central to who I am and my identity. I've kind of been going through some rough stuff. And we did a lot of visualization techniques in like this very metaphorical, imaginary way to kind of like idea build out of the box. It helped me, kind of like lean on my powers of imagination in order to generate new ways of working through things. And so I was more creativity focused and less like me visualizing myself in my real life and moving through actions. But I found it to be really effective, particularly, and this is strange, like 6 months later, like 6 months to a year later is when I felt like the lessons of doing some of that work were really taking hold, almost like they were seeds and they had to like root and grow a little bit before they pushed through. But I'm doing more writing than I've done in years.
That is awesome. Thank you for
Tell
sharing.
me, that's interesting to me. I guess, residual effect. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I've noticed with visualization, especially when I use it with both with skill development and with decision making. There's the process of it. It's kind of interesting. So in the decision making world, so Joanne Vickers is one of the big researchers there to look at in decision training and decision making psychology science. One of the cool things that she's elaborated on is that we can practice making an adaptive, like having to make adaptations. And that just by practicing making a handful of adaptations, unexpected needs can pop up and we're going to be able to respond better because we've done some decision training ahead of time than we would without doing it. And so probably with that residual effect, really what it is that you've probably restructured some of your some of the ways you go about doing that work. And absolutely, it's cool because you probably really deeply engaged with it too. So that's then another reason why you had that long-term effect. And so, yeah, I will say I have clients that mental imagery I will never use with them because they're just like, nope, I don't like this. And so I'm like, oh, it'd be really good for you, but they just, if they're not interested. But then what I'll still do is I'll redo writing the script to go down and help them with some decision making training. And so that's kind of the so with an entrepreneur, that would be I got denied funding. I got told I would not be funded after my pitch. And so then it's okay, so what are you going to do right then and there? Are you going to try to get more details, or are you just going to run home? So we aren't going to visualize handling that no well, but what we will do, because they don't want to do visualization, but what we will do is talk about, well, what are some of the choices that you'd want to make if that happens? So that they at least go through that process. So they aren't going to mentally imagine themselves doing it, but we are going to at least do one layer of rehearsal where they're going to explain to me at least some of their decision-making process and why. And so, and then using that kind of script technique as a way to structure that conversation. So my doctorate, for my dissertation, I did a semi-structured interview, and anytime you can I find that when I can have the ability to have some structure to our sessions where it's, I get to go into more detail about them. And it's really a tool that allows me to get that depth, but does it in a way where they have some sort of product that they can have at the end of that. It just, it makes them feel like that session was time and money better spent than if I don't. Becomes less hanging out and more coaching. And so that's one of the other things that I just, and generally you do that. Yeah. You see a long-term effect when people start explaining their decisions to others. I mean, that's for both coaching and for the field of psychology. It's that relationship with the client. That's where the 90% of the outcomes come from. And then what we do kind of helps make that relationship grow or flourish or flounder. And so, but it's really the relationship. Yeah. Anything else or any other, I appreciate you guys all staying on extra too. For those of you starting out, so I've been starting out, I launched my executive practice in August. Before that, I've been working with professional athletes and just on their team. So for me, getting clients before August involves showing up to the gym. And actually that was before the pandemic, really. It was showing up to the gym and just basically people would come up to me. I didn't have to network, I didn't have to advertise, didn't have to have any sort of digital content, anything like that. And then I switched into, from MMA to executive coaching, to really try and make executive coaching full time because I moved in the pandemic. It kind of basically kind of eroded things in the field of MMA as well. And so the transition came, and it was different because I couldn't just say, hey, yeah, like I'm just here. So a few things I did that really seemed to help me. I started going to networking events. Those are great to start out with, but not to bury yourself into. One of the networking groups that I went with was Tacos Together, and I just kept providing value to the organization that was running the networking event. And that in turn resulted in me being the kind of the head of the Tacos Together conference that we had in was that February. And then I'll be I'm now putting together our next conference in October for our next event. And so as a coach, one of the pathways to start growing your business, to start growing your notoriety that I've found is to not just attend networking events, but attend networking events and then start paying attention to where you can provide value within those events, where you can provide assists and help, and just work your way in and make yourself, you'll find where your skills and abilities are going to be highly desired, mostly by being present, and then finding you reaching outward to provide help than waiting for it to come to be asked. And so that's been kind of my journey so far. I've gone to a couple BNIs. Get invited to those, but do not join them would be my advice. People may have their own thoughts on that, and that's totally fine. I actually got a client out of attending a BNI. I was surprised. And it wasn't from anything that went on through the meeting. It was the talking to people beforehand and just having good questions, just being hyper present. And then, you hear somebody tell you what they're doing and you ask them, oh, how are you doing with this? And you just ask those questions until they get to the point where they don't have an answer. And then they want to work with you. And that's what I found. So it's kind of having that. So the networking events give you the opportunity to be there. And then being there allows you to ask people questions. The other thing that I've gotten from the networking events is I've then been invited in to be a content provider in various mastermind groups. And that's really, for me, that's how it started taking off. And so it was really that I got to do a few mastermind events with a couple of people in the Valley. And that really started to then get my name a little bit more elevated and gave me a lot more credibility. And I think that's kind of the phase 2 to go through, is that social credibility side. So it's like get networking so you get known, and then get known with not necessarily to get clients always, but to get yourself opportunities to show your knowledge. And then once you've got those opportunities to show your knowledge, then it's kind of, I think it kind of becomes a little bit up to the universe on that pace, and a little bit on how much money you've spent on website, advertising, all that other stuff. So that's been my journey so far as ICF and trying to do executive coaching. The other reason I want to do executive coaching is executives can blow out their ACL and still be highly paid. Not so much in the athletic world.
So Toby, I think that's a great segue to your next thing for us. Maybe you could do a networking presentation or be part of the chapter in doing networking get-togethers. Would you be interested in that?
Absolutely, for sure.
Okay, we'd love to have you. Sounds like you've got things to share even more.
Yeah. I've lived a life since I've become a coach as well as a teacher. So for sure. How's it? Yeah, and if anybody has any questions, like I'm by no means at the top of the field, or I'm still fumbling around trying to make things pan out for me. But if you got questions, like feel free to bounce them off. Or if anybody wants to get together and just say, hey, can we talk shop for a little bit? I'd love that.
So can you, does everyone have his email? Can you put that in the chat?
And I tried to copy and paste a longer visualization imagery script to give you another example, but seems to not be cooperating. I don't know if it's more than I can paste on here. I think it's just more than I can paste on here. Oh, I can upload it.
Well, I thank you all for joining us today. I hope to see you tomorrow for our next Coaching Week event. Is there anything you need from me before you go? I'm not sending you away now. I just want to open the door, just like Dr. Larson has done, to anything and everything at this moment.
That's great. Thank you, Toby. Thank you on behalf of ICF High Country. Thank you for joining us, and one of our own. So please keep on coming back and join us at our monthly meetings too.
Thank you all. Enjoy your afternoon.
Take care, everyone. Great to see you.